Our fourth continent is Europe, but first let's review the first three that we visited. We review the continents and what we know about the ones we've already looked at. Where was this art made? How do you know? From which continent is this art? What makes you think so? Where do you think these doors were made? What are they made from? Our additional standards for Europe are identify and describe a still life, paint a still life using secondary colors, mix colors and tell how you did it, create art based on objects that you see. Our main Common Core standard is describe people, places, things, and events with relevant details expressing ideas and feelings clearly. Our vocabulary words are still life, primary color, secondary color, background, overlap, tempera paint. Hundreds of years ago, people in Europe came across the Atlantic Ocean in small boats to North America. Remember the story of the Pilgrims? Those people brought their ways of life. That's the way they do things and their languages. This is England. Which language do you think comes from England? How about Spain? Which language comes from Spain? People from all over Europe have come and made their homes in the United States. So we have ways of doing things that are from all over Europe. This is a beautiful fountain in Spain. Do you remember where we've seen one like it before? Exactly. We saw it in South America, where they also speak Spanish. In Europe, they have cities with rivers, and farms and mountains. They have long sandy beaches. They have sandy beaches with blue water and fishing villages along the ocean. They don't have deserts in Europe, but they do have one city that has water for streets. There are lots of famous places in Europe. You might recognize this one. Here's another, the Leaning Tower of Pisa. It's been leaning for hundreds and hundreds of years. This is what's left of an ancient Greek temple built 2,500 years ago in Greece. This is Versailles Palace, where French kings used to live. Does this castle look familiar? This is Neuschwanstein Castle in Germany, and this is the castle that Disney modeled his castle from. Two favorite sports in Europe are bicycle racing and football. In Spain, some people enjoy watching the bullfight. This palace was once the home of a French king, but now it's the Louvre Museum in Paris. There are a lot of great museums in Europe. The Louvre is the home of this famous portrait. Do you recognize it? Yes, it's the Mona Lisa by Leonardo da Vinci. She's behind bulletproof glass in the museum. There are lots of portraits in the Louvre. A portrait is a picture of someone that was done while the artist was looking at the person, so it had to be a real person, not an imaginary person. This kind of painting is called a still life. We say still because it's always of objects that can't move on their own, and life because the artist is painting from real life. He's looking at the objects while he's making the image. European artists have been making still lifes for thousands of years. This was from a Roman villa, and it was painted on the wall to show guests that the host was always serving good food. This is a very realistic still life painted by Pedro Campos, a Spanish artist. Let's go back to this still life. It was painted by a Dutch artist named Jan van Huysum, and he was hired by a very wealthy man to paint this. What do you see in the painting? I want you to look over here, too. See right here? There's a man. That's the rich man, and that's his son, and his son is pointing at this Roman statue. That was another sign that they were very wealthy people, that they could afford that statue. This still life was painted almost 400 years ago by a Dutch artist named Pieter Claes. And I want you to notice how the feather gets in front of both the skull and the book, and the goblet does too. This is called overlap, and it's a way we create the look of something being real. We can easily see overlap in this painting by Roy Lichtenstein. And if you look, the grapes are overlapping the bananas are overlapping the apples. Now do you know what overlap means? Yes, it means that something is covering up part of something else behind it. We're going to do that in our painting, and that's what we're going to do now. We're going to paint a still life. Here's a still life. We look for overlap, and we discuss the positions of each object in relation to the others. I review primary colors, and I give the children the 3 primary colors. I give them magenta instead of red because I want them to become familiar with the concept of color families. So pink and magenta and fuchsia, they're all part of the red family. Here I've split the yellow in 2 dollops. That way it's easier for them than trying to split a yellow with their paintbrushes. These are first graders. If your school doesn't have foil, a wet paper towel on the desk works great as a palette. I teach them always to stir the darker color into the lighter color until they get the actual color they want. So we take some magenta, we stir it into the yellow, and we get the secondary color orange. We look at the still life again, and we paint our orange in the middle. And you have to make certain that they know that they're going to paint it above the bottom of the page, because developmentally, artistically, they're still at the stage that life begins at the bottom of the paper. It's important to show them how to wash their brush, so they push down a little in the cup, and that they hold the brush up and squeeze the water back into the cup so they don't dilute their paint so much. Next we paint the avocado, and we want to show overlap, but I also tell them that if they will paint a little bit higher, it will also make it look as though it's more real. So we paint a backwards C, and we fill it in, and we have our avocado. We discuss the shapes in the bottle and how we're going to create overlap, and then we mix our purple and we paint our bottle. The next step is to create a table line so that we divide the background from the foreground. At this point, I give them a number of other colors, including white, on their palette, and I demonstrate how to paint pastel colors, and I tell them this is their turn to be creative, and they can paint the background any way they want, with flowers, with hearts, with stripes, with wavy lines, anything. And they do, and they have a wonderful time. Once they're dry, I find that it's often necessary, we go back and we outline each one of our objects in the still life in black so that the background doesn't take over the foreground. Here's an example of a finished piece with a plaid and polka dot background. Another with the striped background. You can see that we put black lines around the objects to make them stand out. last step is to review what we've learned about Europe and about still life, and that's it. The fifth continent whose art we'll visit is Asia. First we review what we know about the continents, and then we review the art of each continent. Where do you think this was made? And what do you think it was made from? Which continent would these be from? What material are they made of? How about this one? What makes you think it's from Australia? Where is this from? And what do you call this kind of art? Good, still life from Europe. And we're back to Asia. It's such a huge place, and people are so different in one place than another that we're going to focus on the Orient. We're going to focus mainly on China and Japan, which is the largest part of the Orient. For our art standards, you're going to use texture, you're going to identify and describe reasons for making art, and you're going to demonstrate beginning skill in manipulating paper. Your Common Core standard is give, restate, and follow simple two-step directions. Our new vocabulary is crayon resist and watercolor wash. Asia has all kinds of land. This is the Gobi Desert. It has mountains and valleys. These mountains are the Himalayas. They're the highest mountains in the world. And this is Mount Everest. People from all over the world come to climb Mount Everest because it's such a challenge. China has more people than any other country in the world. Looks like they all went to the beach today. Look at this amazing forest. In order to farm in the mountains, farmers have to cut their land like stair steps. It's called terracing. Asia has some amazing places. This is St. Basil's Cathedral in Russia. And this is the Taj Mahal in India. A princess is buried there. This is part of the Great Wall of China. It's 5,500 miles long, and it was built almost 2,000 years ago. These people are wearing traditional Japanese clothing. The coats they have on are called kimonos, and they're just shaped like T's with no buttons. You put the sash, called an obi, around your coat. It has a big poof in the back, and that keeps it closed. And look at the shoes the people are wearing. Those are called gettas. And gettas would keep your feet from getting wet when you walked through streets that weren't paved. And this woman is performing a tea ceremony. They prefer tea to coffee. The building on the left is in Japan, and the building on the right is in China. But either way, it's easy to recognize where they're from because the roofs are turned up. All of the Oriental countries are famous for their porcelains. Porcelain is a special kind of clay that they make these kind of works of art from. And you'll notice they like natural decorations like underwater plants and koi fish. If the school I'm working at has a kiln, I go ahead and continue with ceramics, and we make a ceramic piece. This picture is called The Great Wave. The Orientals have a beautiful way of depicting waves. And look in the background, you can see a mountain. That's Mount Fuji, a really famous mountain in Japan. And notice up here in the corner, we have Chinese character writing, which is actually pictures in writing. In China, the dragon is a symbol of strength and good luck. They often put dragons on Chinese fans, and that's what we're going to do. But first, let's look at some more Chinese art. Here we have a laughing Buddha, and then we have stone carved in the shape of bamboo as a brush holder, and a Chinese horse. These Japanese ladies playing instruments were painted on fabric. Tall folding screens like this are used in a lot of homes, and we see this one has a landscape painted on it. A landscape is a big view of the land and whatever's on it. We'll paint one behind our dragon. This dragon is sewn with thread onto the fabric of this scroll. They've always used a lot of scrolls in the Orient, and to read it or to look at the picture, you roll it out, and when you're finished, you roll it back up. It's like closing a book. Here's a painting of a Chinese woman with her fan. Let's get ready to make our own fan. And this is the dragon fan we'll be making. Let's get started. Teachers, to prepare, start with 12 by 18 inch white drawing paper, fold it in half, and using the shorter side, create a curve, and go ahead and cut that out. This is making your pattern. Also, you might notice that my scissors have red dots. That's my solution to disappearing scissors. I dotted them with red nail polish. I fold 3 sheets of paper together at a time, and then I go ahead and trace, and I found that I can cut 3 sheets comfortably at one time. I draw a very simple dragon with the children. We make a circle. Then we make an overlapping circle. Those are the eyes. Then we can make another circle, another overlapping circle, and then a curved line, and a curved line here. And then we put the ears on, and the horn. We draw the eyes. And then the flames. I just have them coming up and curve and down, and any way they do it works just fine. So there we have the fire. And then we do the body, and I usually come up like this, and here, and maybe the tail here. And then on the inside, I want to draw a jaw, and just the other side of the dragon. Now, I have the children do the eyes and everything in crayon, so that's our next step, is crayon. Eyes and the nostrils first in black, then they choose their own colors to trace the outline of the dragon. We especially make the lines around the flame heavy, first in red and then in orange, and then I show them how to make the dragon's scales, and we use a scalloped line. They think of it as bumpy, and each time they come down in this point, they need to come down to the top of the lump before it. And that creates our scales. We talk about texture while we're putting the scales on, and then I have them put a border. They just choose a color they like, and we go ahead and put the border on all the way around. Things don't have to be perfect on this because the folds of the fan really hide a lot. landscape or a seascape. And of course we can make some water lines, which again is the same scalloped line. And then maybe we want to create some land and maybe some bushes. This is a really easy way to make oriental looking bushes. Just go ahead and make straight lines out from your branches. And it gives a nice look. Here, you can look even more so, maybe make our bush have a little thicker stem. And once you get that, you can go ahead and make them a little crooked, which makes them look a little more Asian. Here I'm going to make a tree coming up behind him, and let's just make some branches that are coming out. Now, because they're in the background, I explained that we don't really have to make them look so real, and I just have them make some scribbles on the edge. And again, we get that Asian look. We can add to the landscape by creating larger trees in the background, and again, we can just kind of use that scribble technique. That will work. And make them all more elongated horizontally. A little bit here, maybe some here, and we get the look that we want. Now, it's important to talk about how we're going to use crayon resist. I find that I have to define the word resist. Crayons are made of wax and color, and I explain where wax comes from. We get the wax from grass to make crayons, but they're familiar with how water rolls off leaves, so I explain that leaves are all covered with wax, and then we talk about wax in their ears, and so they understand that everything we're using has a natural source to it, and that wax resists water, and resist means want to stay away from and react it out. And so it's very, very important that they understand they're not to color anything in, because we're going to get to paint. A little closer view of the trees. There you can see a little better how to show them how to draw them. To make your watercolor washes, it's really convenient. If you have the kind that pop out, you can drop it in and add water. If you have this kind of watercolor, you can always wet it, clean them out, and then this is much easier just to cut them and drop it in. You can always pull the plastic out later. I pre-mix my watercolor washes and cap them so that I can carry them around and use them over and over. I stack them in a box like this. You can put 4 side by side in the second layer, so you can carry 8. And then you can stick your brushes on the top, and it's very easy to keep them and to take them around with you. I only make yellow, red, orange, magenta, and blue because I can mix the other colors from that, and the children learn more. What I do is I have them all done.
My leg.
And I pull out desks and pull the chairs away, because I find that children are neater when they stand up, and they're also faster. So I have them, for this project I can do them in groups of 4 or 5. I find the fans don't fit on the primary discs if you're trying to do 6. So I open the 2 cups of yellow, I put the brushes in, and I do the same with each of the other 4 colors. Sometimes I will, if I know we're going to have a lot of water or sky for the background, I'll set up 2 tables of blue, and I have the children rotate through in groups. Everybody has to start with yellow, and then go to red, orange, then go to magenta, and then go to blue. If it's any other order, you're going to end up with your paints looking muddy and gray or even brown, because the watercolor that's already on there will be on the brush and then goes right into, let's say, your yellow. As I demonstrate, I give the children the directions for working in the groups. So, if you're in group 1, now I'm in group 1, then we start at yellow. And we look and see, what do we want to make yellow? Gee, I want my flames yellow. So we paint in the yellow for the flames. Go from this cup. Then, once you figure out what you wanted yellow, next you think, well, what do you want green? Well, I want my dragon space green. Since I didn't give you green paint, we're going to have to make it. So whatever you want green, you paint with yellow. Then when we get to blue, we'll just take a little bit of blue and do that. Let's see, is there anything else? No, that's good. So, I wait though, and I stay with my group. Now I give each group about 40 seconds at each color until blue, when they're probably using more. Then, once we're all finished, the whole group goes to red-orange. I think I'll make my ears red-orange. And maybe also my horn. And that's it. Now I wait for the rest of my group, and to hear our group told, go to magenta. I'm going to make my dragon's body magenta. And here's where we can talk to the children while I'm demonstrating about crayon resist. See how the crayon resists the watercolor? The watercolor doesn't paint over it. It paints beside it. It runs right off, just like water does off the leaf. And we want to make sure we keep our brush nice and wet so that we can paint quickly. Go to blue. And this is where I demonstrate how to put just a little bit of blue on top of the yellow to turn it green. And so we've got a green face. And then I'm going to put a little bit of blue on top of this red and turn it purple. So I'll have a purple horn with orange stripes in it. Okay, then I do have to remind them to make sure they keep their brush really wet, or it will take them forever to paint it and to paint over everything. And we can see how this is working with the crayon resist. And we get a nice blue sky and some blue water. And I do like to have them see me paint this, mainly because I want them to see how fast they should be working. Perhaps not as fast as I, but certainly rather quickly. And we get it all painted, and we go over our border, whichever color we made that, and over the landscape in the background. And this part of our painting is is finished. Oops, I see something right here that needs to be filled in. Here we go. And we're set. Cleanup is really easy. We take the brushes out, and if students or the other teacher clean the brushes for me, I make sure to explain that brushes will bristle up always. Put the cap back on, put the watercolor wash back in the box, and I'm set to go. And I can do it I can progress through the colors as the groups are finishing them. So by the time they get to blue, I have a very short wait before I can pack those up, and we're finished. To fold the fan, I have the children put their finger right at the bottom of the fold, take this corner, and pull it all the way up until it's at the fold, and this line is along the fold, and we crease it. We do the same thing to the other side. Then we take it, still holding the bottom of the fold, and fold it back all the way to here on both sides. And then we turn it over, and once again we fold it all the way back to the fold. And that's it. Once that's done, we put some glue on the bottom on both sides. Make sure we get lots of glue. No, we teach them to put just a dot. Then, from the back, we stick in a craft stick. And we slide a paper clip on and let it dry. Once dry, the paper clip comes off very easily. I give them tempera and have them apply it to the edges all the way around with their fingers. And when we're finished with that, I give them 2 little pieces of curling ribbon. We tie it in a knot, and we put it right here. And our fan is finished and ready to go. We review what we learned about Asian roofs and the Asian people. Last, I slip in portraits of ancient Chinese rulers. Our fourth continent is Europe.